Amazing. Well, look at how many of us turned up. Well, it's good to see everyone in person again. I gotta be honest, I've been doing this now for a couple of years behind the screen in my office or apartment, and you would all be little squares on my screen. So this is just so much better. So I appreciate you all for being here. Love the energy of a room. I love the fact that we're all here to learn and get better as an industry and as a collective. So my goal for today is really just to do that, to share what I've learned over the years and like some very simple and specific things that I've noticed work over and over and over again. And what I'll start off by introducing myself and giving you a little bit of context. But if I just look around the room, what I know is that you all are experts in what you do. Like I love working with beer folks because what you do is, first of all, it's interesting. Everybody else wants to know about it. And you have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of things here today that you all are going to look at and go like, oh, I know how I could do 3 or 5 times better than that. I know how I can take that to the next level. So what I'll challenge you to do is think about it through that lens today. Every lesson that I share, go like, how do I take that and multiply it with my own creativity and my own things, like the reason that you got into this business in the first place. And so here, my general philosophy around this stuff and what I've learned over the years is that social media is just a tool. At the end of the day, I know it can feel like this big, imposing tool that takes up a lot of our time and energy, that it's a beast that constantly needs to be fed with more content and more time. But I've been doing this since about 2009. And what I can tell you is that the tools come and go, they change constantly. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is our business, right? Selling beer, making people feel happy, giving them great experiences, all of the things that we do, the reason that we got into the business, that's what's important. So just to give you a little bit of context, and so you have some idea of who this person is up at the front of the room, my name is Connor. I run a consulting firm called Junction Consulting. Since about 2009, we've been working with travel and tourism organizations, retail organizations to what we call build digital from the inside out. And for that, what that means to us is we noticed, around the mid 2010s, like 2013, 2014, that we're all starting to really embrace this internet thing, right? SEO was happening, email marketing was happening, social media was happening. But what you all, those of you who were around in those days, you probably noticed the same thing that we did, which was like, we had all these like an agency over there, and we had like a outsourced social media person over there. We had a website over there, and none of it really talked to each other. And so we took a step back in those days and we looked at our clients, we looked at the industry, and we said, what do all of the brands that are having the most success, the ones that we look at and we go, they're just killing it. It seems like they've got everything figured out. What do they all have in common? And over and over again, it was the same thing. It wasn't necessarily that they had the biggest budget. It wasn't necessarily that they had the most talented teams. It was just that they had a core understanding of what they were doing and why they were doing it. And then they were able to hire really creative people. And then they were able to tell their stories through blogs or social or email or not social at all, through events and experiences and whatever it is they wanted to do. And so we identified that and we said, all right, well, we want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. We want to stop promoting outsourced social media and outsourced content and instead build that internal capacity. And that everything changed for us in that moment. We became partners with all of our clients. We've worked now with, here in BC, Destination British Columbia, in Ontario, Travel Ontario, Alberta, but also like some really cool local businesses across travel and tourism, hospitality. Currently clients include like Lululemon and Aritzia, but also like great local businesses like Tourism Abbotsford, the Wickenish Inn, a couple of Fairmonts. But the thing that we always try to come up with whenever we're working with our clients is going like, how do we build that internal capacity so what you're doing works for you? And how do we create a situation where everything that you're doing is an investment so that it starts to build over time and it starts to actually tell the story that you want to tell? So that's enough about me and enough sort of backstory. What I want to get into today, maybe if you could manually transition for me. What I want to get into today is 3 different things that we're going to do. One, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some brands who are doing a really good job. And so we're going to talk a little bit about who's doing it well. I'm also going to start off by doing a little bit of a check-in, being like, where are we right now? Because it is a weird time to be working in digital and social and really like any industry. And then the third thing we'll do is I'm going to give some very specific advice about how I think we'll get there. And these are the surprisingly simple lessons. So section 1 is where are we right now? So I don't know if you've been paying attention to this drama. If you haven't, I'm jealous. I'm going to be honest. Twitter was my first favorite channel. Twitter was the channel that sort of I fell in love with social media. 2008, I started a Twitter account for my university. And that's what sort of sparked me to start an agency in 2009. And then around the Olympics, we had all these really cool Twitter projects. I don't tweet anymore. It's just, it feels like this weird toxic place. There's stuff happening, and that's another talk for another time. But what's interesting is that Threads launched, right? So Twitter has it's a big dumpster fire. We know that. But then Threads launched, Meta came out with this new competitor to fill the void. And wow, what a void was it. So if we look here at the adoption, the way that people have actually started to use different channels, we had Pinterest, took about 5.5 years to get to 100 million users. Facebook, Snapchat, WhatsApp, years to get to 100 million users. Then when we look all the way up here, ChatGPT was the fastest growing anything ever in the history of the world, right? By the way, real quick, who uses ChatGPT? All of us, right? Yeah, it's a superpower. We'll talk about that today. And then Threads, 5 days. 5 days to get to 100 million users. Now, part of it, of course, is because like Zuckerberg has the biggest fire hose in the world. It's easy to transition, right? You already had a profile. All your followers would come over. And if we're being honest, like it's been a bit of a letdown. Is it starting to pick up right now? We'll see. But my point is not necessarily that you should be using Threads or you should be using Twitter, which this is, if you haven't seen it, by the way, it's Twitter. Like it's exactly like Twitter. This is what Meta does better than anybody else, is it just rips off other people's work and represents it as its own. If you worked at Snapchat in 2018, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's been some really cool things happening on Threads, right? So like we have photographers from Canada taking pics around like Canadian tourism landscape and getting picked up by New York Times writers. And we have Tourism Canada is jumping on board with some like semi-funny memes. They're trying to ask their Threads followers, if you had one choice, choose wisely, but it goes without saying there is a wrong answer, and it's cherry blossom. They're trying to say, what is the iconic Canadian snack? I totally disagree, by the way. I think I'm Team Pizza Pops. Team Pizza Pops? Team Cheesies, maybe? You're okay, fair enough, yes. My wife agrees with you, by the way. Okay, and then in the meantime, Twitter has done all of nothing, right? In the last 10 years, this is the one feature that they've created. This was recently, since their new CEO was announced. She was like, oh my God, we have this amazing new feature. We have video. And the rest of the internet was like, we've had that, right? Like this isn't new. And so the reason I'm sharing that is not to say, again, that you necessarily should be on Twitter or you should be on Threads or any other platform, but just this idea of a platform-based strategy just doesn't seem to be working anymore. In, say, 2015, 2016, the way that we would build social media strategy would be, we would identify Instagram, or we would look at Facebook, or we would look at YouTube and say, how do we game this platform, right? Like, how do we use hashtags? How do we optimize this? How do we make sure that the algorithm is putting us up at the top of the list? And it works, right? We could get 10,000 followers here or 100,000 views over there by really leaning into the platform and sort of like being optimizers, sort of in the same way that SEO people can optimize your blog post. We could do that with platforms. That's not really the case anymore. And if we do find that like little magic secret that works, it's gone tomorrow. So I believe that when we're developing strategy, when we're thinking about digital marketing broadly and social media specifically, we have to be thinking about content first. And here's an example. Have you noticed on your Instagram feed recently, if you're still using Instagram, that half of the reels or stories that you're watching actually say TikTok up at the top? It's because if people are putting out good content, people will figure out how to share it, right? So like when people are asking me like, should I be on TikTok? Should I be on YouTube? Should I be on Instagram? The answer is kind of yes, but like the bottom line is we need to figure out what we want to be putting out into the world that people actually care about, and they'll figure out how to share it. Right. So the idea of platforms as being our social media strategy, I think, is something that we need to leave in the past. And now we want to think about selfishly, what do we want to do as a business? What do we want to put out into the world? And why will people share that? Okay, but TikTok is a thing. Who uses TikTok, by the way? Be honest. Okay, have you ever been on TikTok? Put your hands up. If you've ever scrolled TikTok, if you've ever posted a TikTok, put your hands up. A lot fewer, right? Right. So TikTok is amazing. It's my favorite channel. It's like, for me, it's like the new Netflix. I could scroll for hours. It's dangerous, but it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? What should we be on TikTok is the most hotly debated topic on blogs and social media. But what I'll tell you right now is TikTok is not just a social media platform as it relates to the work that we all do, which is bringing people into properties and being found, especially when it comes to local businesses. This is one of the most important things we can be paying attention to right now, and they're coming for Google. And I don't mean that theoretically. I don't mean that like maybe in a couple of years. This is literally happening right now. So this is a page within the business portal on TikTok. It says search with TikTok. They are actively trying to become the new search engine, and it's working. 40% of Gen Z say they actually prefer to search on TikTok over Bing, Google, wherever else you search, which is interesting, right? About 3 years ago, I had this whole talk where I was talking about how the older folks loved YouTube. They much prefer to search on YouTube. So if they want to know how to fix something, where to go, what to do, they would rather watch a video than see a bunch of blue links that confuse them. Now the millennials are doing the same thing, but they're doing it on TikTok. So what's happening is, if you look at search results, this is where to go in New York, best hotels in New York. I'd be honest, this is much more interesting than a bunch of blue links where I know that people are just kind of gaming the system. And I know that they're going to give me their whole life story up front and jam a bunch of pop-ups in front of me and a bunch of email subscriptions. Instead, I get a literal view of what it looks like at this hotel and somebody whose face I can see, so I understand a little bit more about them. I have so much more context. I think that this is going to be, I mean, Gen Z, they are the trendsetters right now, just like millennials were a while ago, and Gen X was before. 40% of them not only are actively using this, but prefer this to Google, which probably means, if we're being honest, more like 80% of them are actively using it. And so TikTok is leaning into this. They've understood it. Gen Z is doing this. And some of us who are TikTok users are probably doing it ourselves too, right? If we're going like, is there, how do I fix this? Where do I go? What is the best of? TikTok is a really interesting place to find that information. So again, I'm not suggesting that you should run out and create a platform-based strategy for TikTok. But what I am suggesting is there are some simple things that we can be doing. So these are new features that popped up just in the last few months. They were quiet. TikTok didn't talk about it, but they're very clear indications of where they're headed. If you've seen Snap Maps, or even to a certain extent what Google Maps looks like, you can see that there are ways that you can search and you can actually see what's happening around your city, right? You can see where to go and what to do. Now on TikTok, there's the option for creators to add a location, or for people who are following content to write a review. So if you just extrapolate a couple weeks, maybe, what's going to happen is TikTok's going to come out with this search function, which is a map, where you can search best craft brewery in town. And now instead of just these videos that I showed you, now it's going to be a map view. And it's going to have reviews. It's going to have information. You're going to be able to navigate to it. It'll probably integrate with a Google map. And trust me when I say that, because they are building a partnership with Google. Google search results are starting to show up in TikTok search results, which to me, I don't understand that partnership at all, but it's happening. So anyways, the reason I bring that up is because almost nobody is taking advantage of this, right? Basically no business, and certainly very few craft breweries in BC, if we want to hyper segment, are taking advantage of this. And the very few who do, they're going to be the ones who get found, right? This is like back when Google AdWords first came out in like 2011 or so, when search results were a penny a click. When we look back, we're like, oh my God, how did I not just dump all of our budget into that? I think this is that big. And so how do we take advantage of this? It's not super clear, and that's what's hard about these early days. But what I would be doing right now is I wouldn't run out and create a TikTok strategy. Instead, what I would do is make sure that there are at least a few TikToks being created at our property. Maybe it means reaching out to some young folks. Maybe it means doing a content creator partnership and making sure that they're taking advantage of this, and making sure that you have a bunch of people writing reviews. Because if all we do is we have 4, 5, 6 out there in the world that have our place tagged and have reviews on them, we're so far ahead of everybody else. Everybody else is still trying to figure out what TikTok is. They're still trying to download it to their phone. Meanwhile, you're getting found. So that's one very specific thing. But the broader topic here is that it used to be when I work with larger organizations, there's the search people over there, and these like weird people who sit in the corner and they work on algorithms all day long, right? Then there's the content people over there, and these people are out there with like video cameras and photos, and they're like creating really awesome stuff. They're going to have to come together, right? Because what's happening is search results are happening on social. If we've learned anything from Meta, how they rip people off, they're going to rip this off too, right? Instagram, maybe even Messenger is going to have a search function. And what's going to happen to Google? I don't know. They're trying to be social. They've tried it a few times before. It always failed. Anybody remember Google Buzz, by the way? Oh, Google's not very good at social, but maybe YouTube has some sort of search function. So social and search is coming together. And that's going to be how we have to think about getting found, rather than just we want to tell a story over here and we want to optimize a blog post over there. Now, at the beginning, we all put our hands up, said we've been using ChatGPT. it has become more than just this like fun little toy, of course. I'm sure that we're using it for things like researching stuff, writing blog posts maybe. So I want to start off by sharing how people are actually using chat, or how people are using specifically ChatGPT, and then we'll talk about AI more broadly. So this is a survey done by this amazing company based out of Seattle called SparkToro, the same guy who started Moz. If you're an SEO person, you know what that means. If you're not, you don't worry about it. So they did a survey of the internet, and they found out that 30% of people who are using ChatGPT were using it for programming. Makes sense, right? It can write a whole bunch of code, JavaScript, whatever. If you're even just like a very amateur coder, it's wild what you can do with ChatGPT. But when we move on, education, that's a topic that I'm not going to touch because I don't know if it's the students or the teachers or both, but it would be very difficult to be grading a paper at university right now, and I feel bad for the professors. However, content. So 20% of the total use of ChatGPT is for content. So for those of you sitting there going like, I don't know, is it like okay for me to use ChatGPT to write the outline of my blog post? Can I use it to summarize my content for my website or write an Instagram caption? It's happening, right? This is what we're doing. Now, what I would say is I'm not suggesting that we should feel okay by just passing off what ChatGPT is saying as our own, right? Just like any other tool, we need to be transparent and we need to use it in a way that's like valuable to our audience. But can we use it to come up with ideas, to research? I'll say I write an email every Monday called The Brief, and we've been writing it for about 7 years. It hasn't gotten faster, but we've gotten so much better because we'll have an idea and we'll say, hey, ChatGPT, can you come up with 5 more examples of that idea that we just came up with out in the world? And sometimes it says no, and we're like, oh, well, that was a bad idea. But other times it'll have these great examples of things that I never would have thought of. Our email has gotten dramatically better because of the use of ChatGPT. And then in addition to that, excuse me, sales and marketing. So folks who are sending follow-up emails, folks who are writing sales and marketing copy, they're all using ChatGPT. So this is the thing, right? We even did a lesson, by the way, on eLearning U, which, by the way, I'll talk about at the very end of today. There's a little partnership with BC Craft Brewers to make our online learning platform available to folks. But we did a lesson, that's me up in the corner, where every week we have a guest on. Sometimes it's a hotel owner, sometimes it's a speaker or a blogger. This time we had ChatGPT on as a guest. And basically what I did is I was like, what don't we know about you? Tell us how you can be useful. And effectively what it did is I didn't try to do this. It said, well, I can do this, this, and this. So I was like, well, show me that. And by the end, we had a fully developed marketing plan for a small hotel that included a table with posts, ideas, photo shoots, captions, and even the way that we were going to buy media. And finally, what it did is it told us who we should reach out to every time we were posting to increase our reach. So which press PR outlets, which content creators, and it gave us not their contact information, it gave us the websites that had their contact information on it to reach out to them. So like, it is bananas useful. It is a superpower, and it's not just about writing a blog post that we're going to forge and put on our website. So I think we underrate how powerful this stuff is if we're afraid of it. There's a couple of other tools that I want to call out, and not specifically because of these tools in particular. As far as I know, they could be gone by now and a new one could have popped up. But there's a couple more categories that we can be thinking about. Yes, sir. Please. That's a perfect question. Thank you. And so for context, the ChatGPT, it's a large language learning model. So this could be a whole other talk. But basically what it does is it mines data from around the internet and then puts it into a database and then draws information out of that and extrapolates in order to create answers. And so you're 100% right. Up until about a couple of weeks ago, now it's learned up until about the end of 2022, which is still out of date. There are there's a plugin that you can add into ChatGPT to make it so that it can actually search the real live internet, so it has real access to data. Bing has come out with one too. If anybody's tried Bing's, if you go into the actual Bing browser and use their chat function from there, it can actually browse the internet. And so I use the one that it only has 2022 data. I know that it's not going to be real time, but I know that it can like give me examples and help me cite my sources and that kind of thing. But yeah, real time data is coming, and it's going to be wild what happens when it shows up. Yes, exactly. You're 100% right. So like Google Bard, for example, has more recent information. It's very obvious what was happening is that like ChatGPT 3 or Chat 3, right, was like, we could use it to maybe solve a math equation, right? Or we could say like, we had some very basic functions. And then as we're moving through 3.5 and 4 and getting closer to real-time data, it's growing in the way that we can use it much more quickly. But you're right, we absolutely, and this is a really important caveat that I'm glad you brought up, we have to be super skeptical. Anytime we're putting something in, we can never take it at its word. We have to assume that ChatGPT is lying to us at all times, and then verify and then use it. But like, I'll give one specific example of what we do. We've been doing these Canadian digital adoption projects. Anybody use the CDOT Boost program? It's a great program. If you want to know more about it after, I can tell you about it. But like, we have to do a SWOT analysis. We'll collect mountains of data from our clients, and then we'll put it into this like 50-page report. Nobody wants to read a 50-page report. Like, hey, ChatGPT, take my information and turn it into a 1-page report. It's like, happy to, done. So when you feed it really good data, it comes up with really good results. But anyways, I digress. And I would be happy to chat more about that later because you've raised a really good point. Okay, so more tools that we can use. So we have video creation. This is an app called Pictory. Video creation is terrifying and also useful. So what we can do is we can load ourselves in, and we can say a few words, have a little bit of footage of ourselves, and be like, now I want you to make that a 7-minute video instead of a 3-minute video. And next thing you know, it's created an explainer that we didn't write, we didn't film. It just is. It just exists. So that the videos can be extrapolated. This is, and I actually think this is going to be really interesting for this room. This one's called Magic Studio, which is not to be confused with Magic Studio that's in Canva, although they kind of do the same thing. Specifically, what this does, it does one very specific thing. It puts your product wherever you want it to. And so if you think about bottle shots, for example, or any kind of product photography, t-shirts, hats, whatever, how many times have you taken the same photo in the same setting? And yes, it was interesting the first time, but like, where else are we going to put it in the brewery? Now you can put it on a mountain, at a conference, in New York, Berlin, wherever you want to put it, you can just do that in like 5 seconds. And so product photography changes substantially when we use Magic Studio. But again, that's just one of like literally hundreds that are out there. Anyone use Shopify, by the way, to sell stuff on the internet? Shopify, great tool, great Canadian company. Toby announced this just recently. He's the CEO. I'm a big fan. This is called Sidekick. And again, we could do a whole talk on this. But Toby's theory is that every entrepreneur is a superhero, and every superhero needs a sidekick. This lives on the builder of your website. And what you can do is you can draw on not just all of the knowledge in all of the history of Shopify, but all of the knowledge of all the history of your website. So for example, if you were like, you know what, Pilsner's really selling this year, but the Stout's not. I wonder why. So I go onto the website and be like, hey, Sidekick, why is the Stout page just not converting as well? And they might be like, well, have you looked at the image? The Pilsner image is actually a lot more close up than the Stout image. Or based on your search history on your website, people just aren't interested in Stout, just for example. Or you can say, how is the user experience on my website and where are some opportunities? And it would go through every page on our website, tell us where the bounce rate is high, where the exit rate is high, where people are more engaged, and give us very specific step-by-step ways that we can make those improvements on their site. So AI is not just a fun tool. It's not just ChatGPT. It's also coming for our website. But my theory is this. I think AI is not coming for our jobs. Right? So all of this is terrifying if we're in a content creation or a copywriting or any sort of creative endeavor. I think that the people who are well equipped with AI are going to be superheroes. And here's the analogy that I use. If you remember, probably you don't remember, in the like late 80s, early 80s or so, there was this uprising in accounting. Now, accounting is a very different world than beer. We need accountants, but we're probably not accountants. They were terrified because of this thing called the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet showed up, and they were like, oh my God, why does anybody need me in my huge ledger anymore when they have a spreadsheet? And what has happened since then, we have 3.5 times as many accountants today as we did in the 80s. And accountants today, compared to the 80s, are superheroes. They're able to tell us what's going well in our business, what's not going well in our business. They're able to create financial reports. They're able to give us advice about our sales history, all things that accountants were not able to do in the 80s. And the ones who were afraid of spreadsheets, they're out of a job. Ones who leaned in and learned, in those days, Lotus Notes, but now Microsoft Office, these are thriving, right? Careers in accounting are bigger and better than ever. So I share that not to say that we all should become accountants, but to say that we shouldn't be afraid of AI. Instead, we should see it as being a superpower in our careers. So to recap where we are, one, we're shifting from platforms and algorithms Two, content and sharing. So great content wins. Second, those who adapt into the new search, social, TikTok, Instagram, et cetera, we're going to have a huge advantage because nobody else is doing it. And third, AI is our superpower. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples, and then I'm going to share those surprisingly simple methods that I mentioned. So one is a completely self-serving, very maybe narcissistic example. This is my own company. I'm going to share it with you because we were doing things pretty poorly, if I'm being honest, and we've chosen to be okay with that. And here's what I mean by that. This is like 2000. It was fine, right? We're a digital marketing company. We're like, we need to be on every channel. We need to be doing everything. So we were tweeting, we were posting, we were writing blog posts, sending an email, doing all these different things. And it was fine, right? We had a couple thousand followers, we got a little bit of engagement, but nothing really lit us up. I wasn't really excited about anything that we were doing until we decided, we sat down and we're like, let's take our own advice. The very same things that we're telling our clients to do, which is, what is your story? What is the thing that you're uniquely qualified to tell the world about? What is the thing that people actually want to see and hear from you? And we're like, it's this weird little email thing that we've been doing. We started sending this back in 2016 when our clients were, we were sending reports to our clients and telling them what they should be paying attention to on the internet. They started forwarding it to their friends and asking if they could sign up. And we're like, sign up? Like, we don't really have, this isn't a thing. This is just a report. Finally, we created a subscription box. And then in 2020, we're like, okay, we should finally open this up. We've never really promoted it. We never really got behind, we never spent any advertising or anything on it. But this is the center of our digital marketing strategy now. And oh my God, it has been a relief. Now, every single week, I know what we're putting out into the world. I'm excited about it. I look forward to writing the email. And then our social strategy is literally just taking what we write in the email and spreading it across all of our different channels. And so for us, what we did is we found that thing that people loved, that people actually wanted to hear from us, that we felt really good about putting out into the world. And it doesn't feel like feeding the beast anymore. It doesn't feel like we're just creating content for content's sake. There is like a real mission and a purpose to what we're doing. What we're doing is very different from what you're doing. And so what my hope is that we can get to a place where you feel like, I know exactly whether I'm trying to educate people, I'm trying to make them laugh, smile, I'm trying to get them to have a little bit of fun, I'm trying to bring them, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you can come up with what that core of that story is, because then again, all this social stuff feels like fun, and people seem to like it. We won a bunch of awards, we got a bunch more subscribers, things seem to be going well. And so a couple of things that I wanted to share about that is, one, you absolutely do not have to be on all channels at all times. Every one of the most successful clients that I've ever worked with, and right now I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about like Revelstoke Mountain Resort and the Wicked Inn and like all of these like really cool brands across BC. They have a channel that they really focus on, and they know exactly why they're using it. And then everything else is sort of that flywheel that helps them to do more of what they do. And so I'm going to share another example. And this is a brand. I don't even know if he would call himself a brand. This is a resort that's right there. So right next to nowhere, BC, right? It actually takes you about 8 hours. Here, I would be shocked if I get an answer on this. Has anybody ever been to Flying L Ranch? No. All right. Never gotten a hand on that one. Does anybody follow Michael Larrays on Instagram? You probably should. He's awesome. All right. So what Michael does is he does everything wrong. His ranch isn't even in his name. It's barely in his bio. The Flying L Ranch, by the way, is booked up for years. You can't go there right now if you want to. But what he does is he has this Instagram account where he authentically tells about what's going on around him. And so this is what I tell people all the time. And then he has just naturally figured it out, which is like, what we do is inherently interesting. Now, he happens to be located in this beautiful part of the world surrounded by mountains and horses and wildlife. You make beer, right? You also have really interesting people. You have really interesting facilities. Your guests are interesting. The reason why you got into the business is interesting. But he's leaned into the point where he doesn't just tell the highlights, right? And this is where I think that he's really found a whole lot of his fandom, is he doesn't just tell the highlights. He lets you in on everything. A horse breaks a leg. He's sharing an Instagram live about that. There was actually one of his most popular pieces of content ever was a horse, a very young horse that normally would have unfortunately been put down, but he decided he wanted to bring this horse back and he wanted to take it to a vet, had a GoFundMe, had like 15,000 people on the Instagram live as this horse was going in for surgery. What's going to happen? None of these things go into a content plan. Like, nobody's sitting down and saying, like, we should talk about a horse getting stuck in the mud, or we should talk about the fact that a truck didn't start today. But he's sharing this stuff, and you feel like you have a real inside view as to what it looks like to be at Flying L Ranch. And you never feel like you're being sold to, right? And because he does that, because he creates content where you're like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like I'm really on the ranch. One, that there are people who watch this more than they watch reality TV. Like I said, 15,000 people on his Instagram lives. I think he's up to like 200,000 followers now. It's wild. He can monetize this in a million different ways, and he basically does it. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, like, what is the difference between that and what sort of millennials were mocked for as far as the, like, I had a coach today. Those, I would guess that there has to be quality.
Totally. Well, I mean, he's using an outdated iPhone and Starlink, right? So like his technology is not amazing. I'd say the difference is like he lets people in on like the real and gritty parts of it. So the difference is he's not just like taking an Instagram live of himself drinking a Coke, right? He's going out, there's a grizzly bear out there. Okay, well, it's time to pull out my iPhone, right? Rather than thinking like, oh shoot, I don't want anybody to know there's grizzly bears around the property because it's gonna hurt my business. He's like, let's tell everybody about this, right? Like the drama, the grit, like all of like the realness shows up. And so you're right, millennials, we overshare, but we overshare boring stuff. And I think that's the difference.
He has a really interesting story.
Yes.
But I guess, like you said earlier, that like, what we did.
100%. And like, I'm sure that everybody in this room has failed a batch at some point, or has had a flood happen, or like something awful. But I promise you, in that moment, you didn't think, oh my God, I got to put this on Instagram. Right. But I wonder I'm not saying that should go into your content calendar, and please don't do that. But what I am saying is, like, what if you let people in to that level? And whether it's your email or your TikTok or your Instagram or whatever, what if people felt like they had a sort of a sense of inside information, a sense of ownership, to the point that where they're like, this is my brewery and these are the people who I know and love. So it's a good question. Thank you. It's an important distinction. And so my prompt here is to tell your real story. And I think we all have really interesting stories. And then this is an example of something that I had a personal experience with. This one, holiday house in Palm Springs. And I wanted to bring it up for a couple of different reasons. It's easy to write them off because you're like, oh, it's a hotel in Palm Springs. How easy is life? Actually, is really hard. They're in one of the most competitive marketplaces in the entire world. Basically, if you work in hotels and hospitality, you have a property in Palm Springs. Local entrepreneur saw a motel that they loved from the 40s, bought it, renoed it, and sort of on a shoestring budget, turned it into something really cool. It now today is one of the most popular hotels in all of Palm Springs on the internet when it comes to reviews, when it comes to SEO, when it comes to social. And it's not because they spend a lot of money on social or ads. They actually don't spend any money on social or ads. I believe it's because they've made the whole experience shareable. And it's not like they put up wings or a hashtag or something like that. But the property itself, they've been very consistent in thinking about how they create experiences that get people talking and get people telling their friends, and then ultimately sharing on social. So I got to go here at one point, and this is the actual lobby of the hotel. And my first experience with a holiday house was I got referred by a friend, like a real old school, hey, you should totally stay there when you're in Palm Springs. I go into the lobby and I'm like, okay, I got my bag. Where's the staff? Where's the front desk? Somebody comes up. It's like, hey, buddy, how's it going? How's your day? How's your flight? Hands me a cocktail. We're just like chatting. Like, the people here are super friendly. And it had probably been 10 minutes. And I'm like, I'm gonna be honest, like, this isn't a great first impression. When am I gonna get checked in? And the guy was like, oh, you want to go to your room? No, you're checked in. I'm the owner here. Like, I did your check-in. We're done. We're now, I'm just want to walk you around and introduce you to everybody. And I was like, oh, okay. And then from that moment on, everything flipped. They had a family meal every Friday night where everybody comes together and eats fried chicken. They have a pool where everybody hangs out. They had this is one of my favorite pieces of social media content of all time. And I'll tell you why. So they have a little popsicle stand, right? And you go up and you're like, okay, well, I would love to purchase popsicle. It's Palm Springs, 32 degrees. But instead on there, it's an honor system. You just put your name down on the little thing and they bill it to your room. If you want two, you take two. It doesn't matter. And you know what happens? Obviously, not everybody is going to be honest. And what inevitably what happens is every single person is sharing this. Whether they're just taking a photo and sending it to a friend in a text message, or telling somebody about it at a beer conference, or posting about it on Instagram, everybody's telling their friends about this remarkable little moment. And what did it cost them? 75 cents for a popsicle every time somebody doesn't actually own up to the fact that they took it. So I think what Holiday House has done better than just about anybody that we all can do is said, like, how do we take every single guest experience, retail experience, and turn it into something shareable? And again, not just because we want the IG fame, but because we want people to be telling their friends. We want people coming back. We want people to feel a sense of ownership, which results in reviews and shares and social follows. So this is an example of how like the check-in experience becomes something on Instagram. So what I've noticed over and over and over again is a lot of these properties, you look at their social feeds and you're like, clearly they're good. Like obviously they're taking decent photos. Obviously there's something, they're doing a lot of things right or somewhat right. But there's a big difference between the ones who are killing it and the ones who are just kind of spinning their wheels. And a lot of times it's the real life experiences and it's the way that we think about all the different touch points with our guests. That's the thing that really gets the wheel spinning. And the last one I want to share with you is Kokomo Foods. So this is actually a friend of mine. I'm super biased, but I think you'll see why. She is absolutely killing it. Her name is Katie. This is Katie's Instagram feed for Kokomo Foods. She had a vision, a dream, as we all did, to start a business where she could create this community space. People could come together. She leased this like very rundown fixer-upper in Chinatown in 2018. And since then, she now has opened 4.5 properties. And she's in Whole Foods and other retail properties, just absolutely killing it. And I believe that the reason she's done that is this holistic view of Kokomo Foods that happens to show up on their Instagram feed. So if you notice all these posts, yes, they're pretty. Yes, Katie takes a good photo. But look what was happening in almost every photo. It's collaboration with community. She's working with other people in their neighborhood. She's bringing people in, making them feel like they're a part of Kokomo Foods. And none of it is like, this is Miriam from Brunette the Label, for example. Their office is just down the street from Katie's. And like you've seen the t-shirts that say brunette, blonde, et cetera, that's her. And like they're not selling t-shirts, they're not selling bowls. Like a lot of the times when the stuff that they're posting isn't even about the product, but because they've created this sense of community, that's why she was able to get the next lease and open the next property. And every time there's an opening, this is the very first opening, before she ever served a single bowl. That's me embarrassingly looking at my phone, by the way. That every time she has an opening, it looks like this because people feel a sense of ownership. They feel like they're a part of the community. And she doesn't have to ask people. She doesn't have to push like a buy two, get the third one free or like 20% off discount. She just has this sense of community, and that has built a much stronger business than any single promotion could have. So I think that there's an opportunity to look at every single thing that we do and say, how do we bring other people in and create this mutually beneficial relationship? This is the window at their Kit Street location, inherently shareable. But again, it's not like cheesy wings or apologies if anybody has wings in their brewery. They work, they're great. But it's not the thing that everybody else does, right? We all start as strangers. This is so authentically Katie and so authentically Kokomo that it's not only shareable like as an Instagram post, but also like it makes you remember them. You're going to tell a friend about it. You feel like you understand what Kokomo is all about. Final example, there's no vegan bowls in this photo, none of their products, none of their sauces. It's just a thing that of course they do. And what I know is a lot of people in the room do this as well. The thing that she is incredibly good at is sharing it in an authentic way. And so I can't tell you what authentic looks like for you because it's such a ridiculous buzzword at this point, but she finds the way to get the photo, finds a way to put it online, and does collaborations in a way that everybody feels respected and they feel like there's a mutual benefit out of it. So I believe that when it comes to digital marketing and our ability to create network effects, 1 + 1 = 3, not because we want to hug the world. Sure, maybe we want to do that because it makes good business sense. Because she's been able to go from 1 location to 4, and she's in Whole Foods, and they're killing it online. Their e-commerce is about to launch. All of these things are possible because she's thought in this way. All right, so how will we get there in the last 10 minutes? I really believe that the specifics are less important than understanding where we're going and why we're doing it, but I will give you some specifics. One is that we want to get clear on our success. And I'll challenge you with this, which is to say, if we're 1 year from now, say you're back here at the conference again next year, and you're like, oh my God, I figured everything out in that moment. It's all amazing. Everything is clicking. Our business is killing it because of our digital marketing. What had to change? And that might sound like a ridiculous thing to say, but like we can actually work back in that way and say, was it that we invested in relationships? Was it we invested in content? Was it that we stopped doing this thing with it's clearly not working for us and started doing this thing that we feel really passionate about? So I can't tell you what the answer to that question is, but you have it in your head, I promise you. So what is the thing that changed? And then what 3 numbers matter most? I think if we don't measure it, it's not going to get done. And so as much as we want to tell a story and hug the world, we also want to measure our success. So these numbers over here on the left here, you'll notice these are all the numbers that most consultants are telling you are a waste of time. They'll tell you they're vanity metrics. I disagree. I think that if we know strategically that having followers is going to help us to get to X, Y, or Z, let's get those followers, right? If we know strategically that getting people to our website is going to convert more people to buy product or sign up for our event or whatever, let's get people to our website. But it's also a combination, right? It's like real things, percentage of return visits. If we have more people on our email list, do they come back more often? It's online purchases and reservations. If we're getting people to our website, are they reserving online? So what specific numbers, and I don't think we can have more than 3, right? So what specific numbers do we want to pay attention to? They're going to help us to get there. By the way, I believe that this deck will be shared afterwards, but you're welcome to take photos. Second is, what's your story? I've talked about this quite a bit today, but I really believe that this thing is an unlock, and it'll share an expanded version of this in a second that I would encourage you to take a photo of. This looks like everything that every consultant has ever put into a deck, but I promise you that it's useful. So it is, what is your story? What is the thing that we actually and authentically want to tell the world? And then an understanding that like digital doesn't have to carry the whole load, right? It doesn't have to do everything. In fact, if all 4 of these things are working together, it's so much more powerful. Katie's store, her guest experience, said the same thing that her social says, which said the same thing that her PR said, which said the same thing when she was on a podcast, for example. How are we telling that story across all the different touch points? And so my challenge also after this is, what are 5 different ways that can show up? And it can be any of these different things. And this is when I say, like, when we don't have to have a TikTok account, we don't have to have an Instagram account. Somebody else is killing it at Facebook pages, still awesome, good for them. We don't have to do that. But there are so many different ways that we can. And so what I would challenge you to think of is, like, what are 5 different things that we could do so that we're never looking at a blank page, right? We're never sitting there at our desk being like, oh my God, I haven't put up an Instagram post in a week. What do I do? We have so many of these ideas, and we can think about that in-store signage. We can think about that partnership or that podcast that we want to be a guest on, or whatever that happens to be. So we have these ideas ready to go. 3, we build out our flywheel. This is the thing that, again, looks consulting-y, and I apologize that it is, but man, is it useful. And I know so many of our clients have this printed up and they're up above their desks. And what happens is, when you're sitting there on that Tuesday morning and you're like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what I should be working on, we can just look around and be like, where do we want to work? Do we want to work in our community? We want to talk about events and partnerships. Is digital marketing where we want to be putting out stories into the world? Well, then can we update our landing page? Does our homepage need a little bit of work? And also, how are all of these things working together? So this is absolutely not a must-do list. This is absolutely not something where you have to be doing all of these things every week. Instead, these are all opportunities for ways that we can be putting these stories out into the world. And every single one of these is accretive to the business. Every single one of them builds on the story that we're trying to tell. So the question is, which ones fit your strategy? And that's going to be unique to each one of them. And then content buckets. I'm sure that all of you have heard about content buckets in the past. It's tried and true for a reason. Oh my God, do they work? And I'll tell you exactly how I like to use these with our clients. First of all, we just come up with like the 4 or 5 things we're going to need to do on a regular basis. Product shots, content about our staff, about our story, maybe about our community, about our partnerships. This is not a surprise. We know that we're going to need this content in the future. So by listing out these things, what we're going to create and when they're going to go out, then we can start to batch that content. So we have 3 to 5 buckets. It's not a surprise. We know we're going to need product shots next month, next quarter. We know we're going to need experiential event photos. We know we're going to need blog posts, whatever that happens to be. We create those buckets, and then we can batch it. And specifically what I mean by this is, you might have a photographer come by. Maybe you never have a photographer. You're reliant on your iPhone and yourself. But what you do is you take those 2 hours on a Saturday that you set aside for taking photos of content, and instead of having 1 post or 2 posts that you put out, or instead of just creating an Instagram story, now you have an entire month of content. Because you planned it. You knew that we're going to need 20 photos. We knew that we were going to need a bunch of different headlines or emails or whatever, and we just batch it. We become so much more efficient. And this is the unlock that I've noticed across every high-performing small business, where that seems to be putting out so much more content than they have any business to do, because they're just a team of 1 or a team of 2. Is they're really good at batching their content, and they put it in the calendar. And I really believe that if we don't put it in the calendar, it doesn't happen. This is just me. Maybe you're much better at like freelancing and living your life and doing things. I'm not. If it's in my calendar, it will happen. If it's not, it won't. So what I do is, every Tuesday afternoon, I know I'm sitting down with my team, and I'm going to have to come there with fully formed ideas, and so are they. What happens? Monday night, I'm thinking about ideas. Tuesday morning, I'm like, well, maybe we should do a little bit of this or a little bit of that. I'm scrolling my feeds to see what other people are doing. Tuesday, we show up with a bucket full of ideas. Had we not done this, we would have spun our wheels all the way to Friday and be like, shoot, we didn't get anything done this week. I love just putting 20 minutes, 30 minutes on the calendar, being like, let's just hammer it out together. God, it makes life so much easier. Put it in the calendar, make sure that we have some time set aside every week. And then look at all the friends we have in this room. This industry is so incredibly and wonderfully collaborative. I think there's so much opportunity for us to bring friends along. Very quick story. The pipe coaster, anybody been on the pipe coaster, Revelstoke, by the way? It's dope, right? It's like this really cool little coaster they put on the mountain to bring people in the summer so they didn't just drive through and get gas and keep going. It was so successful, all the local businesses had to shut down because the lineup was across all of the businesses, which is actually the opposite of what they were trying to do. But that being said, the reason this is so successful is because they brought everybody along. They put the coaster up, and they could have just done it and said, internet, do your thing. Instead, they brought in radio DJs. They brought in local athletes and content creators and let everybody be the first rides. They let them have their say on the design. They made them a part of what the coaster was. And then when they put it out into the world, they weren't like crossing their fingers and hoping that they would get shares. They knew they had a baked in content distribution strategy. Today, they have 2 videos, and one of them has just over 1 million views. I think the other one just over 2. Is that what you're saying? They have 2 different launches? The time of the one in Golden?
No,
Yeah. So everybody loves the pipe coaster. And so this is I was just actually up there. I did a little Kootenays tour. And so the Revelstoke is like flattered, but also like, this is our thing. And Golden's like, you can't, license a coaster. So it's a little battle happening in the Kootenays. They love each other, but like brothers and sisters. Anyways, the reason I wanted to bring this up is we all have launches, we all have breweries, we all have events. How can we bring the community in and make them feel like they're a part of it, whether it's the local golf course or the hotels or the DMOs or whoever. So these are partners, the very short list of a very long list of possibilities, but like you have your industry associations, like people who are here, you have local press, your loyal guests, you have all these people who would love to help to tell your story. And it's just about a matter of bringing them in and making it easy for them to do that. And then multiply and schedule. One piece of content can be 5, can be 7. Love Canva as a tool. If you're not using Canva, use Canva. And so that'll be my very quick shout out to that piece of software. There's other pieces of software too. And the final thing that I want to leave you with, my last prompt, is that let's just let everybody know. And this has been my experience, is that once we're creating something that we're super excited about, that we know that people love, we know that we're really passionate about, now it goes from like, oh yeah, we have Instagram, maybe you should follow us, to like you're at a dinner party and you're like, oh my God, we're doing this thing. I'm writing this email every week. I'm bringing this person on who's super interesting. We have this interview this week. Next week, we're doing a feature on the BC tourism industry. You should totally sign up for our email, right? And like that moment at that dinner party is a microcosm for how you're going to run your entire digital marketing strategy. And you'll put it on your website. You'll tell people in press releases because you feel excited about what you're putting out into the world. And then finally, it's just a matter of measure, rinse, repeat. So we came up with those numbers. We came up with the plan. Let's just make sure that we're on track. I'd say every month, sit down, set aside half an hour, sit down with your team and be like, are we on track? Is this working? Is this not? And how do we make it better? And so then the last thought starter, and I want to get to your question, is how do we become our partner's favorite source of content? Your suppliers, your restaurants, the DMO, BC Ale Trail, all of these partners, how do we make it so that they can't wait that we post, so that they can share to their stories, they can share to their friends, we're their favorite source of content. So here's a summary. I'll leave this up. I know that we're tight on time. I really appreciate all of your time and attention. You guys are awesome. Oh, and actually, just before I let you go, I want to tell you about this, eLearningU, which is this online learning platform that we built. We're super excited about it. Came out of COVID. We have amazing guests on all the time. We have a 12-part course where you can get your digital marketing certification. We partnered with BC Craft Brewers. So what used to be $1,000 is now available for $150. If you're interested, you can go to elearningu.com/beer. Very special URL just for this room, and enter your information. We'll send you more about how to sign up, but it's only available for 20 businesses. Beyond that, we've got more free stuff for you. But the first 20 get access to the deal through BC Craft Brewers. But thank you very much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care. And I know that you all